in honor of Halloween, I am going to be talking about a scary story. Missing by Kelley Armstrong. I hope I didn't scare you. Just kidding. I know that wasn't scary, but my hair is pretty scary. Went with the scary hair, and which is really just another way of saying I didn't do my hair today. As I said, talking about Missing by Kelley Armstrong. And I gotta say, even though it is a suspense book, that's really the only thing she did well. It kills me. I'd never read anything by Kelley Armstrong, though when I was looking up reviews, a lot of people read this because they've read her before and they really respect her and they really like what she's done. But the consensus is this is not one of her better works. I guess her genre is more in the adult world and more like sci-fi, paranormal, supernatural, and you can see that, like, it bleeds in, maybe even like fantasy. So like she does a great job at creating ambiance and making it really creepy, but the story just isn't there. The crux of it is this girl named Winter. She lives in a backwater town where she just can't wait to leave, and that's kind of what the young people do, is they graduate and they leave and they go on to better lives. And then she runs across this unconscious guy in the forest, and it makes her question what actually happened to the people who have left. Like, why did they leave? Did they leave at all? So let's talk about it a little bit. The main character, her name is Winter. And can I get a little cynical here, guys? Her name is Winter Crane. So if you had no idea that the author was steeped in like fantasy kind of writing, there's your first clue. So this is getting real nitpicky, but I kind of wish her name had been something else because Winter Crane makes me want to roll my eyes. As I said, she's from this backwater town that's kind of on the poverty line, which means that she does not have money for college. She has an abusive father. It's just not a great home life. And so her whole focus is on getting out, on earning enough money to get her to college so she can go to medical school and then just have a better life for herself. And with her father in the state he is and her older sister Cadence off doing what she does, which we eventually learn about, she has found her safe place to be a shack in the woods. And it's really neat. Like, I like how self-sufficient she is. She is a really strong character, which I connect with strong characters. Although, again, like, you really get Katniss Everdeen vibes when we get into the woods because she has her bow and arrow and she's, just able to forage for her own food. And so I kind of wish I hadn't gotten that vibe. I guess in a sense I wish she could have been a more independent character, especially because that's really her only mode of hunting and gathering. Like, as self-sufficient and capable and intelligent as she is, she can't handle a knife. Like, there are all these other skills that she has not honed, yet I'm supposed to believe she can fend off a pack of wild dogs and, like, feed herself by, shooting deer and skinning them and cooking them so that she doesn't have to buy stuff at the store. So it's kind of like, I thought that could have been a bit more well-rounded. I mean, I know all characters need to have flaws, and so the fact that she cannot wield a knife does tend to get her into trouble, but at the same time, you can't convince me of her capabilities if she really only has one set of skills. Anywho, she is on her way to her shack, and she runs across a really expensive tennis shoe, and she's like, that don't belong in the woods. Or I guess I should say, that don't belong in my neck of the woods. Forgive my bad jokes. And she follows the trail to find this guy unconscious in a tree, and he has been treed by this pack of feral dogs. Chases away the dogs, uses her skill set to fashion a makeshift stretcher to get him to her shack, nurses him back to health because, of course, she wants to be a doctor. So she works at a doctor's office, and she has all these abilities. Like, anyways, and then when he comes to, his name is Lennon. She can't really get the story out of him. He claims he doesn't remember. What he is able to tell her is that he had met a girl named Edie, who happens to be Winter's best friend. And they were supposed to meet up, and things went awry, and here we are. So we don't really know what happened to Edie. She had been one of those people who had left in pursuit of a career in fashion, so she's supposed to be in New York. So now you're kind of wondering, like, did she leave? Or, what's going on here? Things kind of get creepy because obviously there's somebody watching them, and so at one point they hear something at the door, they open it up, and they find one of the dogs basically slit open and hanging from a branch, and they go away, and when she comes back, there's no trace of this dog, so you're like, fact or fiction? I don't know. So they go to her house, and her alcoholic father comes home and kind of pushes her around and threatens her, and he's another character I have issue with. And it could just be because I don't have experience with like a violent alcoholic, so I really don't know what those home dynamics are. Like, would they really be this apathetic towards their own kin, like to their children? Would they really, like, I know that they can get violent, but would he really be pushing her around so much because she might have brought someone home? Would he really be so, like, so particular about sharing things with her? Like, he won't let her drink his Coke. He won't give her money for groceries. Like, I just feel like he was a bit stereotypical. Like, they were a bit stereotypical in their dynamics with each other. Anyways, she finally gets him off her back, and she goes to check on Lennon, who has slept in her room, and she finds that he's gone, and he has left a note saying he's going to fix this. Now, for me, this was the first clue that this book probably wasn't going to be the greatest. Because how can you fix something that you are a stranger to? Like, you can only fix something that you're a part of. So how can he fix something when he has no memory of what happened? He has no way of finding his attacker. He has no way of locating Edie. So it was just a little too obvious that Lennon is part of the problem. Like, he knows more than he is saying. And so the fact that we are supposed to care about Lennon was a problem for me. And part of this description, makes it seem like her relationship with him is more than it really is. Because his disappearance is kind of what leads her to start wondering what happened to other people. But all that we really get is that he's attractive, and that he's wealthy, and, he's so grateful to her for saving his life that he's not going to judge her circumstances. I just, again, like, we needed more. I feel like Armstrong was focusing so much on this mysterious aspect, or on Winter and whatever her journey is going to be, that she sort of left the secondary and tertiary characters unattended. Now Winter is like, this guy's a moron. Like, he was nearly beaten to death. How does he think he's gonna go face this person? So in her attempts to relocate him, she runs into his brother Jude. And so Lennon, at Winter's prompting, had phoned Jude to kind of say, look, something's going on. Jude, because all the people in this novel are, like, ridiculously capable of everything, tracks her down. Like, does a phone trace to know where the phone call came from, and then from there, like, deducted her whereabouts? So he finds her in her cabin in the woods, and he's like, what did you do to my brother? I'm gonna hold you hostage until you tell me what's going on. All this blah, blah, blah. And so they're already at odds. And so this is something I like, because we have two possible love interests. Lennon, who is the obvious choice. He is very attractive, very charismatic, and immediately sympathetic. And then we have Jude, who we kind of got tidbits about. So we know he's probably a pretty good guy, but the way he treats Winter is not like a very good guy. They band together to find Lennon, because she eventually convinces him that she has no idea where Lennon is. Like, she's a good guy, not a bad guy. And that's kind of the way the story goes, is they are in search of Lennon. They run across some other things, but that's the crux of the novel, is what happened to Lennon, kind of what happened to Edie, where is Katie, or Cadence, and then who is this guy who is, or this person, who is this entity, this antagonist that is following Jude and Winter around. In the end, so here's our spoiler, right? And I gotta say, when I was reading the reviews, I didn't really have this issue. A lot of people were saying they thought it rushed. Like, the end was really rushed, tied up incredibly quickly. And I was like, no, I'm okay with it. But the more I sat and thought about it, because I like to make pro-con lists for these books, and the more I thought about it and was putting my thoughts down on paper, I was like, I get why people thought it was rushed. Because here's the deal, all right? For the whole novel, it's very clear that Jude and Lennon are adopted. And so the mystery behind their past is another subplot to propel the novel forward. And so the deal is, their parents had died in a car crash when they were very young, and then the story is that their adoptive parents, who he is a congressman, had basically come to their grandparents because the grandparents couldn't afford it and were like, let's adopt these boys from you. But the true story is that their biological mother had an affair with their adoptive mother's brother, Kendrick. The reason we're given, like, this is kind of why there's a problem, is all of this is just so fast. It's really underdeveloped. So we're supposed to guess, because of Jude and Winter's suppositions, that she got pregnant, because the boys are really close in age, like 10 months apart, that she got pregnant so fast in order to force Kendrick to marry her because her husband was abusive. It's too easy, but I guess Armstrong was like, I need a reason. Here's the reason. I'm not going to go much further into it because I don't have time, because we're at the end of the book. But so we learn that that's the story behind their adoption. That is why they were adopted by this couple. And Kendrick is the bad guy. And we have no clue. Like, we are not given a single hint as to his existence until the very end. Like, the last 5 chapters. That is an issue, all right? So it's not like they talk, like Winter and Jude or Lennon talks about their family, talks about their mother's side of the family, even really references their parents, period. I mean, except for the fact we know they're adopted, that's not really addressed either until the very end. So, it's not the fact that Kendrick is the bad guy and we know that there's a bad guy. It's just like, you expect the bad guy to be someone you've met. Otherwise, it's just pulling a rabbit out of the hat. It's just opening door C and be like, oh, hey, it's him. Like, that's not enjoyable for the reader. So, and the other issue I have with this is Kendrick is always one step ahead. They are running all over the place. They're in the woods. They're like places that it wouldn't be easy to keep up with them. But he does. And then, like I said, where at the very beginning, when Lennon and Winter are in the shack, and they open the door and they find the dead dog, right? So there's like 5 or 6 dogs in this pack. Winter has named them, which again, I'm like, I don't really understand that. Like, what kind of relationship do you have with these dogs? Why is that important? Except because Kendrick systematically kills the dogs, so we need some form of keeping track with how many are left. In any case, when she comes back, there is no trace of this dog that had been hanging and disemboweled in front of her shack. And there's so many instances where this kind of thing happens, where he covers his tracks so well. How does he have time? Like, this is all obviously premeditated, but how can you premeditate something when you don't know the other people's next step? And so, along with just throwing a new random character at us, they don't explain why he's so capable. We are told that the sister thought there was something wrong with him when they were growing up, but that's all we get. And then there had been just a mention of the disappearance of their housekeeper's daughter. But we're not given anything outside of that. We don't know where he's been, like when he developed these skills. We do know that he had come to this town on purpose because they had a summer home nearby. And so he realized it's the best place to hunt because people leave, like teenagers leave. So who's going to look for a teenager when they leave and don't want to come back? But I'm just like, I had a really hard time buying him as the villain just because I didn't know anything about him throughout the entire novel. Even when we do meet him, we're given no background. We're given no explanation as to why he is so skilled. Like, he kidnaps Cadence. He kidnaps Winter's sister. So the thing with Cadence is, and this is another subplot, and it's supposed to create tension, and I guess it kind of does, because Cadence has left. It's been like a year or 2 since she left, and the whole deal is that she had been in an abusive relationship, but she'd gotten into college, and he had said, I can't live without you, don't go. Winter had encouraged Cadence to go, saying, you know what, if he really loves you, he will wait, or he'll go with you. And then he ends up killing himself. And so we're given the impression that Cadence blames Winter for this. Blah, 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 blah. So now that Winter has made this list of teenagers who have left, and Cadence is on this list, she is like, I want to follow up with Cadence. I want to make sure she is okay. And so she goes home and she's trying to talk to her dad about it. And this is another thing with the dad. I can't buy that he would completely ignore her this much. Like, he wants nothing to do with his daughter. I still don't really know why. Like, is it because she reminds him of his wife? Is it because he has guilt over kind of trapping his wife into this low-meaning existence? Like, I just, like, it's my thing with parents. Like, why do we have parents in novels if we're not going to do anything with them? Like, is this Armstrong's excuse? Like, he's not going to be an active part in the story? She needs a parent figure, but I don't really know what to do with him, so I'm just going to make him a drunk who wants nothing to do with her. After she talks to him, he takes initiative, which is completely out of character for him, to track Cadence down. And then somehow Kendrick learns about this. I guess he had their phone tapped, which, again, all of this foresight from a character we know nothing about. So he poses as I think a guidance counselor of some sort, and he gets Cadence to get into his car, and he kidnaps her and all this other stuff. But I'm just like, I don't I don't buy it. And that's really difficult for me, is when authors expect me to accept something when I'm given no reason to accept it, but for the mere fact that I said so. Like, it's the whole parental reasoning of because I said so. Just because she put it in a book and got her book published does not mean it's okay. So I liked, those are things I didn't like. I also, I wish I'd had more of Lennon, because he's kind of made out to be a really important character. Someone who is sort of like in writing, you have your inciting event, and then your key event. And so your key event, your inciting event is kind of what gets the plot rolling, right? And your key event is what involves your protagonist. So in a way, he is our key event, because he is the one who gets Winter wondering, who makes Winter need to try to seek him out, get involved with his brother, and then on with the plot. But we know nothing about him. He's there in the first 3 chapters, and outside of mentions of him in the discussion between Winter and Jude, we don't get much of Lennon until the very end, when Kendrick drags him through the door, and then is going to slit his throat. Which, okay, so let me explain all this again. So the thing about some of the missing, all right? And again, like, in the premise, we're led to believe that a ton of people who have left are actually missing. In reality, it's like 4 girls, okay? Which is something else I did not understand. Like, if leaving is such a big deal to these people, then that means, I'm guessing, if it's a class of 50, because I'm thinking this is a really small school, 48 of them are leaving, all right? So for decades, or maybe just a decade, I don't know how long this has been a thing in the town, but even for 10 years, that's 400, at least, that's almost 500 teenagers who have left. And we only have 4 missing girls, like, who show up. We get a 5th disappearance, which I'll explain, and which is something actually I liked and wish I had more of. But I was like, you really misled me in your premise. What happened is, as I said, Kendrick is a creepy dude. He had been involved in the disappearance of their housekeeper's daughter, so he'd come hunting in this small town, and eventually so maybe part of these 400 or 500 people are actually just never mentioned, but he did hunt them down and kill them. But so he at some point was like, you know what, I think my boys have inherited this part of me, so I need to foster this in them. And so he thinks Lennon is the better choice. So he takes Lennon under his wing at some point. Like, we don't even know. Like, I don't think Lennon actually knew Kendrick was his dad. I guess he did know it was his uncle, even if it was an adoptive uncle. But, like, we're given no time frame for any of this, except that at some point the friends had noticed Lennon was acting strange, and that one friend had seen him get into a car with a man, and he just thought they were in a relationship. Anyways, so he had taken Lennon under his wing and was teaching him the finer points of abduction, and I guess all of the abduction is not like to keep them forever, but maybe like a cat and mouse where I play with you until I'm done with you and then I kill you. And so he had learned of Lennon's meeting Edie, and then he had tricked Edie into coming home, said, hey Lennon, look what I got for you, and Lennon was like, I don't want any part of this. And so then Kendrick kills Edie, and then he beats Lennon up, and Lennon runs away, and that's where the book begins. He now has his sights set on Winter, which is why he's following her around the entire book, because he can tell from the evening of interaction that Lennon liked Winter and that she was special to him. That's why Winter is being hounded by the dog killer, and people in her life are like Cadence are being abducted, and it's just this huge cat and mouse game. So yeah, so that's where we're at the end of the book, when he brings her into the shack, and she's discovered all these bodies, and Jude and Winter, because they're he-men, they take everybody down, and it's all okay. Again, I just thought that was a little too easy. I can see where it comes from, because Winter was set up as a very capable character, but it's kind of like she was set up as somebody who was capable, but then she was incredibly vulnerable and incapable during the bulk of the novel. So it's like we open up with her as being someone who can hunt and gather and be self-sufficient. And then we end with her as being someone who doesn't need to be rescued. She can rescue herself. But in the interim, she is prey. She is being chased. She is incapable of figuring out who's doing this and why. And that's where my issue with the whole knife thing comes in. It's like, dude, you can't always do long distance protection. You gotta be able to do some hand-to-hand combat. And she just can't. She doesn't even have a cell phone, so she's just kind of off on her own this entire time, trying to track down the missing kids. And so, yeah, good for her for not needing a knight in shining armor, but at the same time, I don't really feel like she lived up to the hype. Let me talk about one of the missing teenagers that she was trying to find, because I actually liked this little storyline, and I wish that it had been bigger, but one of the teenagers she was tracking down, so she'd, written down her list, and she was going to the parents. So she went to one girl's parent, and he caught sight of her list, and he automatically got real cagey and not violent, but was like, you need to give me that list, you need to get off my property. And so she was like, you know what, I bet you all the missing kids, their bodies are stashed in that cellar. So she goes to the cellar. She doesn't find bodies. She finds one body. It turns out that the dad had been drunk one night, hit the kid, and then passed it off as the kid had left town. He wrote a note and all this stuff, and stole money and clothes just to make it look like the kid left. Which, again, the dad does not seem like the sharpest tool in the shed, right? And if he's a drunk, and at that time he was a pot farmer as well, I have a really hard time buying him being able to pull that off. When he have clarity of mind to do all of that, and especially how do you sneak into somebody's house? It could be one of these situations where it's a town, people don't lock their doors, and maybe he knew the parents had a weekly engagement. Maybe they went to dinner every Friday night, and so he was able to get in and get out without being caught. Again, it doesn't quite add up for me, but I did like when she stumbles across the body, because it was just a really creepy little situation, and it's the last thing you expected. I'm not one who really cares if authority figures are made to look like they can't handle things, because some authority figures can't. Just because you're a policeman doesn't mean you're a good policeman. Just because you have a police force does not mean they're a good police force. I do think that people in authority should be given credence. I don't think all parents should be idiots. I don't think that all cops should just be washed off as homespun backwater cops who are only in it for themselves, and if they don't like you, they're not going to pursue your leads. But that's exactly what she did here. And that is something I saw in someone else's review. And I don't want to say it was a mistake or it's ever a mistake for me to read other people's reviews, just as long as I don't let it get in my head while I'm reading. But this was another thing that when I read it, I was like, there's no way that the police force could have been that bad. They were that bad. So Cadence's boyfriend who hung himself, his name was Colton, and so everybody blames Winter for it because apparently going off to college is not as important as staying with your boyfriend who is emotionally unstable enough to commit suicide because he can't live without you. Forgive me if this is actually something that's happened to you, but her book was just so full of stereotypes. It's just like, are you kidding me? Because then, in fact, the whole reason he killed himself was to make Cadence and, by association, Winter feel guilty. Like, now you can blame yourself for my death because I told you I would hurt myself if you left. And then, since everybody blamed Winter for giving Cadence the advice to leave and go to college, it's Winter's fault. So now Winter has to feel the guilt. So anyways, the police force, the sheriff and his, I think it's like the sheriff and then his son is a deputy and then his daughter-in-law and his wife work there. And like they all hate her. And so it doesn't really matter what she says. They're not going to believe her. She brings Jude into it and they're like, oh, well, because Jude had left home. And he had kind of disowned his family, so he had created this whole new identity. And so since his license did not have his legal name, they're like, we don't believe you. And I mean, it was ridiculous, okay? Over the top ridiculous. I had a huge issue with this. And whoever wrote that part of the review, I was like, you hit that one on the head because that was a super weak moment. Like, that's disrespectful, in my opinion, to the police force. Speaking of reviews, somebody gave this book a really bad review solely on the fact that there was this mistreatment of these animals. And I guess this person works at an animal shelter and knows about feral dogs and was like, this is not how they act. And basically she's slandering the name of feral dogs. It's like I heard of somebody else who gave a book a bad review because it took place in 2020 and did not reference the coronavirus. Do you know how long it takes to write a book, to get an agent, and then to get the book published? It takes years, right? Unless you're psychic, which I don't believe in psychics, how is somebody supposed to know this was going to happen, right? And but the thing about fiction is it's not real, okay? So in that person's book, in their book's world, coronavirus didn't happen, right? So it's like you can't give a bad review for something that minor, okay? So the dogs, I liked it at first. Because, they are something to be feared, to be scared of, to be aware of. They are something that Winter has to escape from and to be safe from. But I'm like, so I don't know at what point this all started. But apparently Kendrick had gotten hold of these dogs and was starving them. And he was torturing them in other ways. And in that, I guess, like, I'm assuming they weren't actually feral until he got his hands on them. But again, we're given no frame of reference for how long she's been in contact with these dogs. If this has been this same feral dog pack her entire existence, or if it kind of, new dogs come and old dogs die. Like, at first, I thought it was cool because it created the mystique. And you're like, well, that's pretty gross that someone would disembowel a dog and then hang it from a tree and then, like, it's gone. And now you're wondering, are you crazy or not? And then there were some moments where she had to run from them. But then it was just too much. Because, again, it's giving Kendrick too much power without ever explaining how he was able to do all of this. It just didn't make sense after a while. Like, she overplayed the feral dog pack. Anyways, that's kind of a nitpicky thing, but for me, I was just like, I think she emphasized them a little more than she needed to. You know, for a scary story, it was scary because there's a heavy, ominous presence, but it wasn't a good book. It was well written, but it wasn't well executed. It didn't. It got slow. Like, I mean, I liked it. The chapters were really short, so it did make it go faster. But I was just like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Like, can we please get back? Like, all we're doing now is just talking and sitting and talking and sitting and chasing rabbits, and it's just like, meh. You know, maybe we could have spent that time actually looking into who the villain really is. And I did like Jude and Winter's romance. She does end up with Jude. I really couldn't care either way, but I did like how it wasn't a stereotypical, I don't like you, and then I love you. It was a slow progression, because she'd known before she met him that he did have good qualities. Then she meets him and she's like, what happened to you? I don't like you. Like, I don't trust you. I'm going to try to get away from you as much as I can. But then over the course of them being teamed up, she learns the reasoning behind why he changed. And so I thought it was a natural progression. And it didn't automatically go into the sex zone. It was really more about pursuing justice, trying to find Lennon, like what happened to Edie. We get very little resolution because it's hard to resolve something you didn't know was there, except that everybody's healthy and they adopted the last feral dog. Yeah. And there's, I guess, like a potential for reconciliation between Winter and her dad. Again, I could have done without that just because I thought that relationship was just too stereotypical and there wasn't enough substance there for me to care about them reconciling. I did like that Cadence came back into the picture and that they resolved their issue and there's forgiveness there. Although I really would have loved more of Cadence because there was a heavy emphasis put on why don't the sisters talk. So I wish we'd gotten more backstory about that. She didn't sprinkle it in as much as I would have liked her to. But again, that's personal preference. I would not recommend this book to anybody because I found very few favorable reviews, and then my review is not favorable. I would suggest maybe checking out her other novels because people seem to really like those, and those are what gave her her name. But her foray into YA, I don't think was very successful. So for me and the Sanderson sisters, happy Halloween!